Hey guys, Dr. Snellgrove here, just recording a quick video companion piece to Araby, the James Joyce short story in our syllabus. I say quick video, this is relatively short as stories go. I was just reviewing an online version of it that's like 5 pages or so. And it's an interesting exercise, and this is not me slamming James Joyce, often considered one of the best writers in history, just not by me. But I do like them. But yeah, this is a story where like not much happens, right? If you were talking to somebody and they asked, hey, what was that story you were reading about? It's like, well, a boy goes to a market and he fails to buy anything. That you really could sum it up in one sentence. So instead, most of the action and most of what makes this, I think, an interesting story has to do with the interiority of our narrator, just kind of like what is going on with him, what drives him, the feeling at the end that maybe revelation, maybe recrimination, but we'll get there. All right. So this story is a bit like Boys and Girls in the sense that it's a coming of age story, right? Bildungsroman is our fancy word for that. And so this one is a little different though. Boys and Girls was largely defined by the existing relationships of the characters. The narrator in that story wants to impress her father, wants to be one of the guys, et cetera, and she's very distraught after she lets the horse out and she's declared to be just a girl. So here we have a male narrator, and I guess if this wasn't obvious from the story, a lot of this hinges on the idea of the narrator and his friends being on the cusp of puberty, more or less, or at least the cusp of sexual awareness. Sounds weird to say that talking about children, but I mention this because you get a little bit of what life is like for him and his buddies. They hang out these ratty little streets. They stay out playing late, even if it's really, really dark. And one of the things that captivates them, and particularly captivates the narrator, is this character known as I never know if I'm saying this guy's name right, Mangan's sister. And they basically like to look at her. There's no other way. We get this line. It's like her dress swung as she moved her body, and the soft rope of her hair tossed from side to side. So the narrator really likes to look at her, and he has a move that would probably be a creepy move if he wasn't so young and so inexperienced. It says, every morning I lay on the floor in the front parlor watching her door. The blind was pulled down to within an inch of the sash so I could not be seen. When she came out on the doorstep, my heart leaped. I ran to the hall, seized my books, and followed her. I kept her brown figure always in my eye, and when we came near the point at which our ways diverged, I quickened my pace and passed her. This happened morning after morning. I had never spoken to her except for a few casual words, and yet her name was like a summons to all my foolish blood. So I don't know. I like this story because so much of it seems like relatable, weirdo young boy behavior. He has this crush on this girl. And as he talks about in the story, the interior narration, the idea of actually confessing his feelings to her, asking her out, all of this is the furthest thing from his mind. So instead, the best he can come up with is this cockamamie plan where he's just like stalking her and making sure that, oh, she's heading out. All right, time for me to head out. Not to walk with her, not to talk with her, but to walk behind her. And then I guess to maybe make himself look less creepy or make it look less obvious what he's doing. It's like, oh, then I pass her. I quickened my pace and passed her when we came near the point at which our ways diverged. All right. And we get some more relatable, like lovesick young boy stuff here. There's a bit on my digital version, the second page here, that I always thought was pretty moving. So her name sprang to my lips in moments of strange prayers and praises, which I myself did not understand. My eyes were often full of tears, I could not tell why, and at times a flood from my heart seemed to pour itself out into my bosom. I thought little of the future. I did not know whether I would ever speak to her or not, or if I spoke to her, how I could tell her of my confused adoration. But my body was like a harp, and her words and gestures were like fingers running upon the wires. And so I just thought this was such a wonderful, like lovesick, angsty, confused, young boy. Doesn't quite know, like eyes filled with tears. He's not sure why. It's like very emotional, very easily overwhelmed. And, he doesn't know, like, for all of his interiority. And he does have an interesting, like, what you might call a fantasy life. Like, we don't really hear about his daydreams like we hear about the narrator in Boys and Girls, but we do have this interesting thing here where he talks about walking through the streets on Saturday evenings when my aunt went marketing. I had to carry some of the parcels. He says that let's see here. I imagined that I bore my chalice safely through a throng of foes. So he does have kind of an active imagination, but he can't even imagine talking to her. He can't even imagine confessing his feelings to her. And I do love, I think this is a very interesting image. The one thing he is sure about, my body was like a harp and her words and gestures were like fingers running upon the wires. So, she controls him, she plays him, she of course knows none of this, but he knows how much power and control she has over him, which is what leads to kind of the inciting incident of the story. We go from this very sad sack thing where like there's a rainy day and he's, in the house. I pressed the palms of my hands together until they trembled, murmuring, oh, love, many times. Just, I'm palpably sad for this kid. And then all of a sudden she speaks to him. And, it's such a wonderful, again, she has no idea how bad he's crushing on her or anything. And so, her speaking to him was literally just making conversation. She asked if he was going to Araby, that's the title of our short story. And it's basically a big old marketplace, a big bazaar. And she said that she would love to go, and it's in a way that indicates clearly she's not going to go. And so the narrator asked her, hey, why can't you go? And so she says that, what is it here? Talking about how there will be a retreat that week in her convent. And so, again, we get a pretty powerful idea that the young boy hasn't really thought about the future. It's like, yes, the girl you're crushing on goes to a convent. There's probably not much of a romantic future in the offing here, but he doesn't know that. And so, he hears why she can't go and still kind of making conversations like, oh, it's well for you. Like, hey, it's cool that you get to go. And so all of a sudden he has taken up just this inspiration. Well, if I go, I will bring you something. And, we don't even, the narrative doesn't even tell us what she says to this, how she reacts. But, he builds it up in his head. Like, this is going to be an opportunity for her to, or for him to get an awesome prize for her and bring it to her. And, it goes without saying, but like maybe their relationship is going to develop further based on that. And so we get a lot of him just looking forward to going to Araby. It says that I wish to annihilate the tedious intervening days. I chafed against the work of school. At night in my bedroom and by day in the classroom, her image came between me and the page I strove to read. The syllables of the word Araby were called to me through the silence in which my soul luxuriated and cast an Eastern enchantment over me. I asked for leave to go to the bazaar on Saturday night. And we get a weird little connection maybe with our Edgar Allan Poe tale. My aunt was surprised and hoped it was not some Freemason affair. And so it all works pretty well, right? Because our narrator, he lives with his aunt and uncle, it seems like. And so they come to an arrangement like, yeah, I'll give you that money to go to the market once I get home. And so I thought this was just relatable, impatient, young boy stuff. He's just waiting for his uncle to show up, and his uncle's taking forever to show up. There's like an old woman that's visiting the house, and he talks about how he had to, kind of put up with the conversation. I love this. I had to endure the gossip of the tea table. It's like, oh God, I had to listen to these people, talking about, the gossip of the tea table. And incidentally, this is the reason that, spill the tea has become a phrase for share the gossip. Fun facts. So eventually, the aunt is trying to warn him, like, you might have to put this off, buddy. And so finally, the uncle comes rocking up at 9 o'clock at night. All right. And so he's halfway through dinner, and the narrator's like, hey, I need that money now. And uncle's like, well, people are in bed after their first sleep now. And finally, the aunt actually takes his side. Can't you give him the money and let him go? You've kept him late enough as it is. And so the uncle, says, yeah, I'm sorry I'm late. Here's your money, and so the kid heads out to the to the market. And it's such I don't know what it says about me that I enjoy this insane contrast so much, because the early to mid part of this short story is all about he's hyped up to go. He's going to find her something great. He's going to impress her. It's going to be awesome. And then pretty much from the moment he leaves the house, everything is crappy and everything is a disappointment. His train ride is kind of miserable. Then he gets to the place. It's like, in front of me was a large building, which displayed the magical name, talking about Araby. It's like, all right, he's arrived at his magical destination. What's it going to be like to get in? And it's like he has to pay to get in. And I found myself in a big hall girded at half its height by a gallery. Nearly all the stalls were closed, and the greater part of the hall was in darkness. I recognized a silence like that which pervades a church after a service. So it's like, his aunt and uncle were both right and wrong. Like there is at least one stall, still open, one place still selling stuff, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But for the most part, like, he missed the party. The whole point of coming to a bazaar is all sorts of different vendors are in place, but he showed up too late to experience most of it. And so now it's just he's a stranger in a strange land here, one of the last, would-be customers here in the bazaar. And even the clerks, the vendors aren't really that focused on selling stuff at this point. Like, he overhears just a fragment of two people kind of talking and arguing. It's like, oh, I never said such a thing. Oh, but you did. Oh, but I didn't. Didn't she say that? Yes, I heard her. Oh, there's a fib. It was like two guys and a gal talking. And so then the gal actually sees them. It's like, hey, do you want to buy anything? And as a former clerk, I worked at the Dollar General 4 years, guys. That's my badge of honor. The tone, this really resonated with me. She asked if he wanted to buy anything. The tone of her voice was not encouraging. She seemed to have spoken to me out of a sense of duty. It's like, she doesn't really want to sell you stuff, but she feels like she has to ask. And so I looked humbly at the great jars that stood like Eastern guards at either side of the dark entrance to the hall and murmured, no, thank you. And so she just like adjusts the vases, whatever you want to call it, goes back to the conversation. And so we're left with him at the very end of the story, like the ultimate strikeout. He had to expend all this like political capital with his family in order to come out here. He spent the whole week hyped up about this, and it's just a crappy place where most of the vendors are gone. The one that's here doesn't really seem to want to sell him anything. And he knows damn well that he is going to, return empty-handed. And so this is our very end of the story. I lingered before her stall, though I knew my stay was useless, to make my interest in her wares seem the more real. Then I turned away slowly and walked down the middle of the bazaar. I allowed the 2 pennies to fall against the 6 pence in my pocket. I heard a voice call from one end of the gallery that the light was out. The upper part of the hall was now completely dark. Gazing up into the darkness, I saw myself as a creature driven and derided by vanity, and my eyes burned with anguish and anger. That's the end of the story. James Joyce, always leaving us on a happy ending. All right. So what is going on here? And it's basically like, it's a coming of age story, but much like Boys and Girls, and this may be one of the primary ways they're similar, like the lessons that the characters are learning, the things they're discovering are not necessarily happy or positive things, because he doesn't explicitly say it or think it, but what's really going on here at the end is him beating himself up. Why did I do this? Why did I come out here so late, in the middle of the night to this weirdo bazaar and not actually buy anything for a girl that doesn't actually know that I am interested? And so we get this thing, I saw myself as a creature driven and derided by vanity. And this is kind of the hard lesson that he's learning. Like, what was it that brought him out here? He wanted to look good in front of this girl that he's crushing on. So, he is driven by vanity, and vanity drove him out to Araby, and it's like not buying anything. It's just creepy and weird here. So in his mind, he is driven by vanity, but he's also derided by vanity. It's like, oh, you wanted to look so cool for her. You wanted to impress her. This is what it got you. Just nothing. Just a wasted night, wasted time. My eyes burned with anguish and anger. And I will say, I've read the story a lot, and I never actually made this connection. So this is kind of a game time insight I'm sharing with y'all, if insight it is. But we have that interesting bit earlier where he talks about how his eyes filled with tears and he didn't really know why. And that's like, if you have memories of that time, that's one of the worst parts of growing up. You're just filled with these overflowing emotions. You don't really know what they are, much less what to do with them. Now at the end, he's crying again, but he does know why he's crying. My eyes burned with anguish and anger, right? So the idea that he has learned something about the world, and he has learned something about himself. And here's the crucial part: he doesn't like what he sees. Because what do you think of when you think of vanity? You think about people preening in front of a mirror. You think about Dr. Snellgrove, futzing with his hair before he hits the record button on the camera. We think of vanity as, people that enjoy their reflection a little too much. And here, he is a creature driven and derided by vanity. The idea that this whole experience has helped him see himself, helped him reflect on who he is as a person. And even though, it's vanity almost in the past tense, like it was vanity that drove him out here. Like, I'm going to look so good. But now he did get a good look at himself, doesn't like what he sees. It's not a coincidence he calls himself a creature, so in his own reflection on himself and his actions, he has dehumanized himself. Like, oh, I'm little more than an animal, a creature driven and derided by vanity. Vanity drove him there, and then vanity mocked him and left him sad, angry, nothing to even bring back to the girl that he wanted to impress. So yeah, this is James Joyce in a nutshell. It's very relatable stuff, very good writing, very rarely leaves you in a good mood. I guess if you want James Joyce writing leaves you in a good mood, you should go read his freaky sex letters to his wife, Nora. That stuff will, your eyes will be wide the entire time. I can guarantee that. There's a reason those don't get published in the Norton books. But yeah, I think that's about it for Araby. I should hopefully this week have up another, brace of reading responses. Well, really one reading response for 2 stories kind of thing. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to text me. Feel free to email me. If you text, it's 863-835-2399. And I'm looking forward to reading those intros. Bye.